Welcome to The Explainer. So, today we're tackling one of the biggest, most important stories, maybe the most important story of all time. How did we go from thousands of years of just scraping by to a world where so many of us are, well, rich? It's a story that literally changed everything: how we live, what we do, and even what we eat.
For most of human history, life was just survival. It was lived right on the edge. Back in the 1600s, if you were an average worker in Western Europe, your entire day's wages could buy you about this many calories. That's it. It's basically the bare minimum you need to not starve. Just think about that for a second. Your whole day of work just earns you enough fuel to get up and do it all over again the next day. That's a tough existence.
Okay, now let's jump forward to 2012. A low-skilled worker, so not a CEO, just a regular person in a wealthy country, could afford to buy this many calories a day. Yep, you're seeing that right. 2.4 million. That is not a typo. We're talking about a nearly 1,000-fold increase in what your money can buy. It's a leap from mere survival to an abundance that would have been completely unimaginable just a few centuries ago. Wow.
And this chart, this right here, tells the entire story in a single image. It's what economists call the hockey stick of human prosperity. Look at it. For centuries, millenniums even, it's just this long, flat line. Stagnation. Nothing really changes. And then, bam, around 1800, something happens, and the line just shoots straight up. That vertical takeoff, that is the great escape from poverty. So, the billion-dollar question is, what happened? What lit the fuse on that rocket?
And it's not just us asking this. The Nobel Prize-winning economist Robert Lucas said it perfectly. Once you start thinking about a question like this one, it's hard to think about anything else. The consequences for human life are just staggering. It's arguably the most important economic story ever told. So, okay, let's dive in. Let's go right to the beginning of that incredible upward turn.
All right, Section 1, the Industrial Revolution spark. This is it. This is the moment everything changed.
So, the Industrial Revolution. You've heard the term, but it's so much more than just a few new gadgets like the steam engine. You have to think of it more like the discovery of a completely new recipe, a recipe for creating wealth on a scale never seen before. It was a total, fundamental shift in how we made things, and it all started in Great Britain before spreading like wildfire across the globe.
And here's why it was so incredibly powerful. It created this self-reinforcing cycle. Right? Ingenious new machines did the work of tons of people. This created new jobs, higher pay, and of course, profits. And what do you do with profits? You reinvest them. You fund more inventions, build more factories. Profits funded more progress, which created more profits. It was this amazing virtuous loop that finally broke that centuries-long stagnation and kicked entire economies into overdrive.
Okay, so we have this powerful cycle. But what was the engine actually driving it? Let's unpack the recipe for prosperity. It really all boils down to one core concept.
And that concept is labor productivity. That's the secret sauce right there. See, sustained long-term growth, getting richer as a society, it doesn't really come from just working more hours. It comes from making each hour of work more valuable. In simple terms, how much can a worker produce in an hour? If you can figure out how to make 10 loaves of bread in the same time it used to take to make 2, well, your whole society is on the path to getting richer. So, how do you do that? How do you boost productivity? Well, this engine really has 3 key parts. Think of them as the main ingredients. First, you need smarter, more skilled workers. That's what we call human capital. Second, you need better tools, machines, and infrastructure. That's physical capital. And third, you need that secret sauce. New inventions, better ways of doing things. That's technology. For now, let's just focus on those first 2. Okay, so when a whole society gets more educated and skilled, economists call it human capital deepening. And this chart for the US is just a perfect example. Look at this. Back in 1970, only about half of the adults in the country had a high school diploma. Fast forward to the early 2000s, and that number is up over 80%. It's simple, really. A more educated workforce is a more productive workforce, period.
And guess what? It's the exact same story with our tools, our physical capital. The average American worker today has access to equipment and infrastructure that's worth nearly 3 times as much as what a worker had back in the 1950s. And again, the logic is pretty straightforward. Better tools let you get way more done, way faster.
But here's a really crucial piece of the puzzle. You can have the most skilled workers and the fanciest machines in the world, but none of it works without a stable foundation. Think about it.
Would you invest your life savings in a new business if you weren't sure your property was safe or that the courts would enforce your contracts? Of course not. That's why strong institutions, things like the rule of law and protecting property rights, are so essential. They're like the operating system that lets the whole engine of growth run smoothly.
All right, Section 3, the global catch-up race. So now we know the recipe, right? Can every country use it? The secret seems to be out. Invest in your people, invest in your tools, encourage new ideas, and build a stable society. So, if everyone knows the recipe, can any country just follow it and get rich? That question is kicking off a fascinating global race.
And this leads to a really cool idea called economic convergence. The theory is pretty simple, actually. It says that countries with lower incomes can and should grow a lot faster than countries that are already rich. And why is that? Well, because it's way easier to copy and adapt the recipe than it is to invent a whole new one from scratch.
And you know what? The data actually shows this happening. Just look at this table. It breaks the world into these growth clubs. On one side, you have the fast growth club, with countries like China and India posting absolutely stunning growth rates year after year. Then you've got the slow growth club, the already wealthy countries like France and Japan, and their growth is much, much slower. They're still growing, but not at that explosive catch-up pace.
And the result of all this catch-up growth, it's been a global revolution. Honestly, it's hard to overstate the impact. The economist Richard Easterlin put it best when he said this has been the greatest advance in the human condition ever. We're talking about the fastest, biggest improvement in health, housing, and education for the world's population in all of history. Billions of people lifted out of poverty. It's just incredible.
Okay, so this all sounds amazing, but it brings us to our final, and maybe most important debate. Is this convergence inevitable? Will this catch-up race just continue until everyone, every nation, is rich?
Well, it's a huge debate, and there are really compelling arguments on both sides. On the one hand, you've got reasons to think the catch-up will continue. Poorer countries have this advantage of backwardness, right? They can just copy technology that's already been invented. Plus, a new road or factory has a much bigger impact where there aren't many to begin with. But, on the other hand, the rich countries aren't just sitting around. They're constantly inventing new technology, pushing the frontier of what's possible, which lets them keep pulling ahead.
And here's the reality check. Even in the most optimistic scenario, this process is slow. Like, really slow. Look at the math here. Even if a country is growing at a blistering 7% a year, which is incredibly fast, after 30 years, it would still be way behind a rich country it started out 10 times poorer than. The point is, the gaps we're talking about are massive, and closing them isn't something that happens overnight. It's the work of generations.
And so, that leaves us with this final provocative question. It's really one of the biggest questions for our future. Will this engine of growth eventually lift all nations to prosperity? Or is the great escape a race that never truly ends, where the technology frontier just keeps moving and the leaders keep pulling away? We don't know the answer yet, but the race is on.